think that her character is at the level of maturity yet, quite frankly, to where she can take an honest look at herself and be like, well, wait a minute. Am I really to blame in any of this? Like, maybe there is something to be said for, like, not running guns blazing into every situation.
AoA, that's a triple play. New episodes, I couldn't wait. Yeah. Open your mind at the first gate. Press play, no need to debate. AoA, check me out. Look, clocked in, you can catch the hype. Golden Dawn, how we follow the light. Anime like life, married to it, my wife.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages? Welcome back to the AoA show. I'm your host, as always, Ian, along with my boy Isaiah.
Yo, yo, yo.
And Gavin.
What is Gucci flip flop?
And today we are going to talk about Tower of God, the Webtoon, Season 2, Chapters 205, or episodes rather, to 214. If you didn't check our live stream yet, you definitely want to go catch that. We had a live read-through of these chapters. It was a lot of fun. And as per usual, we had folks from our Discord compile some questions that they'd like us to answer, or just, catch some of our thoughts on some of the things that we went over and read. And we compiled the 7 that we wanted to answer and that got some of the most upvotes. And we're talking about them here today. So if you want to be a part of that for future discussions, definitely join that community Discord. It is in our description. You can find the link there, among many other links for ways that you can support the show. If you do like the content today, make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, sharing with your friends, and commenting your thoughts down below. What did you think of our discussion? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Be civil. What were your thoughts on these chapters in particular, this arc, where we are, and what are your thoughts on Tower of God as a whole? So, hopping into it here, Gavin, why don't you fire us off with the first question?
Oh, let's go. First question by Smile, please. All right.
Smile.
We got, what do you think about Shalile and about Endorsi being destined to fight Viol? Which Hots also acknowledged. Predictions if Bam and Endorsi will ever have to fight against each other with their lives on the line, way down the line.
Somebody asked us in chat. I think you were using the bathroom for a minute, and they asked Isaiah and I. They're like, "Who do you think would win?" In the fight. So this was a pretty interesting one in general. I mean, the way the story's going right now, there's a pretty good chance that she's going to have to fight him at some point. And even if they get out of this whole debacle that they're in, being that Endorsi, I would assume, has to make a choice at some point or another, right? And a way more important choice maybe than she's made up until now, to ultimately side with not just Jihad, but how everything operates around here, keep her status, become a part of this tower, more than just a pawn, and if she does decide to do that, Bam is in direct opposition to that, in one way or another, whether it be through his alias of Jewel Viol Grace, or whether it really be Bam himself in some ways. So, if she continues down this path, I would assume that they'd have to clash at some point or another. It just seems like it's destined. I'm sure they'll find some route to get them out of it or something like that, or whatever. And I guess you could argue that Endorsi, they may not get to that point because Endorsi, within small micro decisions, has kind of been making her choice. I guess some could argue as she's been going along, which I could see the argument for that as well. But there will have to be an ultimate decision at the end of the day when she ascends this tower. Hey, are you a princess of Jihad? And if you are, you know what that means, right? You can't have love. You can't do these things. You got to disregard him, etc. You can't be helping a knock. So there will be a decision to make. As far as if they fight each other, at least right now where we are in the story, I would like to give it to the boy Bam personally. I think if they went toe to toe, I really don't have a solidified answer on that because it's so hard. Endorsi is incredibly strong, but so is Bam, and incredibly overpowered in their own rights. I mean, I think if they weren't toe-to-toe now, the one thing that Bam might have a disadvantage with is that, he might not be as readily able to kill or incapacitate Endorsi if it called for it. But I could be wrong there because as we saw in these chapters, his mindset has been kind of shifting, from what we used to see. And who knows, Endorsi's has as well, where at first I'd be like, yeah, maybe she wouldn't have a problem just kind of laying the hurt on him. But, I mean, she has clearly fallen for him in more ways than one, and it's not just that she's using him or anything at this point, at least the way I perceive it. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Who do you think would win?
Well, I don't really want to say who'd win because I actually don't think that they're going to fight.
No, that's purely hypothetical.
Yeah. I mean, winning a fight, I guess, bam, that would be like. But I don't really want to go into an explanation about that. I mean, I'm more in the mindset with this question in terms of where like what are they destined to do if they're to fight, which Hod's acknowledged. And I feel like with Shibasu's mindset almost switching a little bit in favor of Kun and Bam's plan, which became apparent with the whole bomb thing and, kind of setting them up for the fight with Kaiser. And I feel like if there might be a minor altercation with Bam and Endorsi in terms of them maybe getting into like a minor fight, but I don't think it's going to be anything really major where they're going to kind of have like the gun to each other's throat and be like, I'm going to off you. Like at the end of the day, I feel like Endorsi's going to go through her growing pains and, encounter Bam with Kaiser, and that's going to lead to something. But at the end of the day, I feel like if Shibasu had this mind switch, I feel like it's going to come down to everybody looking at her and being like, okay, now Shibasu's on Kun's side and Bam's side. You really just need to kind of go along with it because this just isn't going to work no matter what way you go to take it. And that's just what I feel like is going to happen, like, ultimately, is that she's going to be swayed a little bit, and then she's going to encounter Bam with Kaiser. There might be a little back and forth, but ultimately it's going to kind of reside into her kind of following along with Bam and doing his thing. And I guess that's just my thoughts on it. I really don't think that they're going to fight just because of the relationship that they have. And I could be completely wrong with it. And she might really fight him, but ultimately I don't see it really going past anybody dying, but, more her kind of just shifting her mindset again in favor of Bam.
Fair enough.
So that's what I feel.
Isaiah, what do you think? And specifically, in the question, if there's something that comes down the line, doesn't necessarily have to be now.
I don't think so. I kind of agree with Gavin in the sense that but what's more to my point is I think that ultimately they might acknowledge that the paths that they're on now down the line might lead to an altercation. Like ultimately, if Endorsi is to pursue the being a Princess of Jihad and Bomb is to pursue being Bomb, but Hotz has that line in the chapters where he's like, even if that's something that's fated to be, if this is destiny, I think I'd rather fight destiny than my friends. I think that ultimately they are both going to come to the decision of if this is what people say, or if this is where our trajectories are forcing us to fight, we'd rather oppose that. We'd rather oppose the system that's forcing that onto us rather than just fight each other, because I think ultimately their connection, whatever it's going to be, is going to be more to each of them than Bomb wanting to do whatever he's trying to do and Endorsi being a Princess of Jihad. I think now it's I wouldn't even say it's kind of tough to say because Bomb's mind is still changing. He's still kind of trying to cement what it is, his purpose and who he is. But Endorsi does clearly seem to be going down a path of this position as a Princess of Jihad, is definitely doesn't seem to be worth more to her than people. Otherwise, I don't think she'd be here. I don't think she would be risking her neck for Anak. I don't think she'd be risking her neck for Shibasu. Anybody. She wouldn't be on this team. She would, if she wanted to be, if she cared more about being a Princess of Jihad than being a friend to, these teammates, she could just sit back and do nothing. She could, her path, her trajectory would have been so much easier. So I think ultimately we've already seen signs that, to each other, their relationships with each other and subsequently their friends means more to them than whatever fate has in store for them.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you, Smile. So next question comes from Dark North Emperor. It says the complicated nature of her being abandoned by the Lopo Bia clan, the bullshit nature of the test she was put through as a princess candidate, her being exploited by her family. How much of an impact has SIU created with just this quick backstory as it refers to Kaiser? Also, does this justify all of Kaiser's actions afterward? Does anybody have thoughts?
Yeah. So I think that I think it's definitely interesting, and getting her backstory definitely lets me sympathize with her a little bit. Again, there's so many, this tower is so large and there's so many people in it. It's so easy to forget, it's easy to forget that when you hear one person's story and one person's struggle and to be wow, this person has just been absolutely the definition of fucked over by this tower and the system. But Mr. Refalajo had a pretty shitty circumstance. You know what I mean? She's not the first person or character we've met who has been fucked over and wronged by the tower. I would argue to say that some of our our heroes, protagonists, whatever you want to call them, have also been fucked over by the tower. So I think it's one thing to be fucked over by this system, and clearly her being part of the Lopo-Baren family sort of accentuates that, because it's not like she'd be a princess from she wouldn't be in Endorsi's position where she's a princess but not from one of the 10 families. Like, she's from the Lopo, like that holds even more weight and more pressure on her ultimately. But like, I don't know. I definitely don't think at the end of the day it excuses anything she's done. I mean, Baum has that line which kind of wraps up my thoughts, which is that, like, at the end of the day, you have still tortured, hurt, destroyed, and ruined innocent people's lives. And you know what I mean? Like, one wrong action does not excuse, and you know what I mean? Just because one person was wrong doesn't mean you get to do wrong things to other people who had nothing to do. Like, you know what I mean? So at least in my eyes, that's really where I'm at.
Sure. Gavin, anything?
I don't know. I definitely feel for her more than I'd say other antagonists that we've come to deal with. And I don't know. I just feel like, it comes down to, at the end of the day, it's your choice whether you're going to wrong people or not, and how you're really going to follow those hardships and move on from them and progress. I just feel like in her case, she's really been grappled by her family in terms of, even if she really wants to be a better person, it's almost she's unable to. There's no route that she's ever going to be able to escape the Jihad family and their grasp. And it's like, even like, I feel for her in the terms of there really is no correct path that she can go down, which ultimately leads to her demise, which I feel like is more of an excuse than I've seen other antagonists in terms of going down the path that she has and really feeling like there's no way out. Because at the end of the day, I feel like back when she was younger, I feel like she definitely had a different mindset than what she was forced into. So if she had some sort of redemption arc in terms of meeting Bam, I mean, there's really no chance of her. It's going to lead to her death. I mean, there's really no other way around this unless they somehow, like, I just mean, like, I feel like she's going to have to die anyway. But if there was a way to bring her redemption in terms of having the possibility in, having a better life and being a more positive person, like, I feel like she is redeemable in a sense, and I would be okay with that redemption, because I don't know, I feel like a lot of the problems that she has had to deal with, there really was no way for her to overcome them, honestly. Like, she couldn't have just, like, escaped in the tower or gone down a better path. Like, she was pretty much literally forced in this position, and it's like, you're never leaving. So, like, what else? Like, I don't know. I really couldn't feel like that she could have done anything on her own volition behind the scenes to do positive deeds or whatever, because ultimately her situation just forced her to literally, you can't do anything. So I feel for her. I honestly, let me see, I don't think it justifies all of her actions, obviously, because she did horrible things, but I would say that I could see redeemable causes with her, and I would be happy if she was able to see said redemption or at least work for it, and I would get back behind her and she would have my support. But it doesn't justify everything. However, I can feel sympathy for what she has gone through. So yes, I think that is my 2 cents on it. So
would you, I guess I could, just to play devil's advocate here, I guess there could be an argument leveled though against that she does have a choice, especially when she technically has a choice, but I guess it becomes abundantly clear, at least to me, when she finds out that the upper people of Jihad and the Tenegray families had no intention of her ever paying off said debt. So at first she's forced into said situation, and they say, okay, you do this until you pay off your family's debt. But then there's a point where she doesn't, she realizes, and she's fully cognizant of the fact that she's never going to pay said debt, and chooses to keep doing it anyway. So do your feelings toward her change ever so slightly or not? Do you hold her a little more accountable once she's aware of the knowledge that there was, like, that she, no matter if she keeps on doing this, she's not getting out anyway, and then continues? Or do you think she's all the same, or just curious?
My view doesn't change at all, because at the end of the day, you're still, you like for her to rule against her family again, like she's in this position because of the disgrace that she's brought on them, and she's trying to work that off. So not only is she living with that guilt, what is she gonna do? Like, you can't just bring up to him and be like, all right, my debt's never gonna get paid off, like let's figure this out. They're gonna be like, no, you're dead. Like there's no sweet talking in that regard. Like there's literally no way that she can get out of that situation that doesn't lead to her own demise. Like, you can't delegate it, especially when it's like you already owe these people something. Like, what are you going to do? Are you just going to become like an ex-convict and just try to escape within the tower? Like, that's the thing where, in my eyes, I can see why she feels like there is no escape, because I really don't think that she is, especially because of her ties with the Lopo Byren family and being a part of that. Like, it's not something that you could just walk away from unscathed without expecting a target on your back at the end of it.
So, do you think so I guess the only alternative, at least in eyes right now, would be death, right? Mm-hmm. So do you think that her actions are more excusable, less excusable? Do you think that there's a valid option of just being like, yeah, I will quite literally bite the bullet for this scenario so that it limits said suffering or system? Or do you think that it's all or nothing?
Well, I think if she bites the bullet, that's not going to save, or that's not going to solve the situation. Because they're just going to put another person there, like, at the end of it. So it's like, that's the thing where I don't even feel like there's any duality with her taking her life, because this shit's still going to go on. Like, so that's why, again, I feel like if there's any point of redemption in meeting Bam and going through this and like at least having that option, I feel like she's the character that deserves said redemption and would actually have the ability, if cut the ties from her family, to move and grow and live a better life, to positively impact people. It's not a switch, like a light switch by any means, but like, I just feel like if given the opportunity and like a solid chance, that from other antagonists that we've seen, she would be able to make that move. Although, again, I'm not justifying everything that has happened because it's messed up, but I feel like compared to other people, like, I just can't see like an option where she could have just bailed out or do anything differently. Like, she got tricked in the beginning and then literally thrown into this roller coaster. Like, there wasn't a point when she was like, oh, I have the option, I don't want to do this, like, this is messed up. Like, no, honey, you're messing with this and you're doing it for the long haul. Like, you have no way out. So, I don't know, I feel for that.
So, just one last, so would you say, or could you say that arguably it would be better for her once she learns that there's no intent to pay off this debt and that she's basically being forced to do this kind of for the fuck of it, that there's more merit to her character if she were to be like, you know what, even if I can't beat the system, even if I can't stop this entire organization from going on, like, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be the one pulling the trigger here. Then the latter of her just being like, well, it's already going to happen, so I might as well lay down and take it.
That's a valid thought, but the thing is, for someone who's been so literally psychologically and physically beaten up, I don't think that, like, it's easy to say, obviously, to be like, oh, this stuff has happened, just F it, let's move on. But at the end of the day, she has literally been beat down for thousands of years, like, until you're at that point where you're at rock bottom, where it's going to take like a group and a half of people to pull you back from it. Like, and that's why I think if meeting Bam and having that light, she would then find some sort of salvation. But to find it within herself from everything that she's went through, or everything that she's been through, I feel like it very much is easier said than done than just be like, oh, say fuck it and just move on and live a better life and be happier. Like, I just feel like for everything that has happened against her, like, I feel more sympathetic in terms of why she feels those things, and it makes it that much harder to just climb up. Although not impossible, I can see validity in the actions that has been taken.
Okay, fair enough. So moving on to the next question. Isaiah, you want to kick us off?
So next question is also by Smile. He says, thoughts on Bam feeling the need for godlike power to keep everyone safe, and Kun telling him it's okay to choose sides and not always be fair to stay human.
Any thoughts?
I like it. I think that one of the things I love the most about this story is how complex the situations and circumstances can get in sort of the blink of an eye. And I think that, to be honest, Bam has had so many people in his life and in his corner recently, whether we're talking about Fug, people like the Jihad family, whoever, telling him that he has to take this stance, right? Whether it's like, you need to be the god of fuck, you need to be the slayer, you need to be the one who, brings down like the ultimate execution hammer and says, gives the final yes or no on this whole situation. That it's like, it's kind of nice for him to have somebody in his corner that like reminds him that it's like, no, dude, like at the end of the day, you are not a god though. Like you have these powers, but like being a god is not just about having super strength or whatever. Like you are just a person like anybody else here, and you're prone to make the same sorts of decisions and mistakes that anybody can make. And like that's what people do. People make decisions sometimes that are I guess reasonably unfair or not 100% logistic, because people are oftentimes whether it's caught up in your emotions or swayed by bias or whatever you want to call it. It's probably a little bit of a hot take, but I like seeing Bam become more human in that aspect and like make definitive decisions that like say yes to one person and no to another, because it makes him feel more real. It makes him feel more like a person to me, and I think that struggle ultimately is just a little bit more engaging to me, and I would assume other readers, than like this guy who's like trying to become a god and make the best possible decision every time, because you're not going to. You can't do that with a story this big, and especially if it's going to get bigger. It's impossible. There is no such thing as like the definitive best right play, right? You've got to make a decision, and between A and B, and sometimes that means leaving A or B high out to dry. But like that's what people do here. You know what I mean? That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. Gavin?
I guess my first thought when I read that question is, and I kind of felt it when I first read it, when Bam referenced, like, if I had attained this godlike power, I can make that difference. And in my mind, like, honestly, Death Note vibes were screaming, where I was like, you may have, like, because obviously we've seen Bam not make the best decisions almost out of, you can say selfish, like, needs and desires. So my thought is he isn't at that mental fortitude to be able to really have the godlike powers, and I would say use it appropriately, because we have seen instances where it's quite apparent where he can use it inappropriately. So, but again, when you get that balance from Kun, it kind of like puts those thoughts on the wayside, because you have someone who is able to almost settle Bam down and really solidify him where his place is in Earth and just like in society, and be able to say, no, you don't have to have all this on your back. Like, you're a person, you have friends who you're able to just like disperse the load to, and we're all in it together, and we're fine. Like, you don't necessarily, yes, the power is going to benefit us, but like, don't feel like you need to attain it and be the sole proprietor in terms of fixing everything, because then you're really going to turn into a situation where you're only going to be fixing what you think is right, and not being able to step back and look at different scenarios from other viewpoints where Kun comes into play. So it's interesting to see as we move forward how getting more power is really going to affect Bam's mindset, and I'm curious to see if it's going to make him more selfish, or if it's going to stay balanced in terms of his team and bouncing ideas and thoughts, because that is honestly a scare of mine. And Kun, where if Bam gets more power, how are we going to control it? Because very easily Bam can go off on his own stuff and be like, I'm not listening to anybody, I'm doing my own thing because I have the power to. So definitely going to be interesting to see it as it moves forward, and hopefully he just keeps a good mindset and just doesn't do selfish things. So yes.
Well, might as well stay on your camera, because you got the next question, my friend.
The next question, we have number 4. Thoughts on Endorsi's reckless nature. Is it time for her to curb it, or is it something that sets her apart from others? And what do you think her attempt to take Bam's name? Think about her attempt to take Bam's name. Switch it over to you guys.
Sure. Yeah. Breaking down the question here. Thoughts on Endorsi's reckless nature. She's reckless. she's reckless. That's her character. You know what I mean? Like, there's really not many thoughts to have on it. To be honest, past what I've probably stated in prior things. Obviously, she doesn't make the best decisions all the time, and her reckless nature can get her in trouble, as we've seen here. She's just been very fortunate in the sense that she is incredibly powerful as compared to most of the opponents she goes up against. So this reckless nature you don't really see many of the downsides, because she usually just bops whoever on the head she needs to, and then it's done, right? Yeah. And like, so she doesn't learn. And a lot of destruction and struggle forces growth. So with her character, sometimes it's like, I think they even, they might have referenced this in one of the things where it was like, or in the blog posts, I think, where it was like, you know, you have to understand, like, Bomb is someone that's completely opposite from like the princesses or people from the 10 great families, because their whole thing is that they're already gifted with this ridiculous ability. So they don't have to put as much time and effort into the actual training of their body, all this kind of stuff. And they really just kind of more perfect the techniques or whatever it is, right, to go above and beyond. So it's anything like in real life when you're endowed with incredible ability sometimes, or if maybe you're very wealthy by, you know, and you didn't have to do much for it, you could feel entitled. You can be reckless. You can be impulsive. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes it's not the case. Some people are exempt from that. But, you know, a lot of the times you see it, and Endorsi is no exception. So, I mean, you know, at this point, it's like, you know, that's her character. It is what it is. And like, I understand why she's like that. Do I agree with it? Not really. But again, she's never been in a situation where it's really had much of a downside until now. And we all knew this time was coming, right? Like, there has to be like, unless she's the most powerful character in the story, which she's not, there has to be an event at some point or another where she hits a brick wall and it's like, oh, I can't just hit this with a hammer anymore, right? There's not a nail for me to hit. I have to actually find out a way to maneuver around this wall, or jump over it or get under it. And like, that's something that's really not, you know, part of her thing. You know, it can be, but she's never really had too much time to flex those muscles or train them. So she's now kind of between a rock and a hard place. So it is what it is there. In terms of, is it time to curb it? I mean, it's been time to curb it since the rip, to be honest with you. But again, for the reasons I just stated, we are where we are. Or is it something else that sets her apart from others? Definitely sets her apart. Reasons I said. You know, she has the ability to be set apart from others because of how much latent talent and ability she's been given and gifted. It just, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, it does make for, I guess, an interesting character, because we can't have everyone that's like calm, cool, collected the entire time and whatever, because then you have a bunch of robots, you know what I mean, going into it. She's very emotional. It is what it is. And says, what do you think about her attempt to take Bomb's name? So this is probably one of the more hot take things that had happened within the course of the stream and even afterwards, right? Because although it wasn't exactly this question kind of gets enveloped in the overall question of like, why? You know what I mean? Like, why did they have to come here? Why do they have to do this? Why aren't people talking more often? Why are you being selfish, or why are you being selfish? Are your motives justified, etc. when it comes to Bomb's team versus Shibasu's team, right? In all the pickles they've been caught up in. I definitely don't think it's the right move to take it by force, but I do understand why Endorsi feels like she needs to. She does feel cheated. She feels like her feelings are not being justified, and she feels that, you know, Bam is basically choosing Rachel over her, at least at this point. It isn't until after that Bomb explains, he says, hey, this isn't just for Rachel. I might be able to find something out about myself. But again, you know, Endorsi sees my life is on the line. You know, I like you. Like, Rachel clearly betrayed you. Like, why are you, like, this is a big deal that you're throwing, you know, you're, in her terms, I would say, throwing me under the bus, right? Leaving me, abandoning me. So I can totally see her reasoning for taking, for wanting to take Bomb's name by force. I think she thinks she's pushed against the wall, right? There is no other option for her. And it's really not in her character, like I had stated, to go into a 4D chess game, you know what I mean? And think about like every single contingency. She's like, I'm strong. I smash things. That's what I do. So this is the route I'm seeing. These are my feelings, and you're hurting them. So it's like, this is where I am. Do I think it's right? That's another topic of discussion, but I understand why. So yeah. Oh,
like your watch keeps on hitting the stand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Anyone else, if they had any thoughts?
Thoughts on her reckless nature. Is it time to curb it? Kind of agree with Ian's sentiment where it was time to curb it the day we met her. But I don't agree with, like, I guess so much that's her character, so we kind of just got to stick with it. I think the idea behind her character growing, and not by her own nature, because she's not just going to wake up again, like you said, if she is somebody who's been drenched in this culture of like dog eat dog world, she's not just going to wake up one day and be like, well, maybe I could not do that. Yeah. But I would say that's the point of her friends, and more importantly, her teammates, right? Those are people who can very much ground her and make her, or at the very least present her, another alternative that is not something she would have thought of. Because if Endorsi's only options are I feel things and I smash things, you know, I would venture that maybe someone like Shibusu would be like, well, hold on, let's maybe there's a different alternative that is not about smashing something or hurting somebody. Like maybe we, you know what I mean? Because I do think that Endorsi's character doesn't work unless it gets out of that rut, right? If she stays in this place of being this like power hungry, super strong, emotional monster, like the character fails, right? This character doesn't gain any more complexity and doesn't get any better or grow unless she grows, unless she learns to realize that like, the world is not black and white. It's not all about ultimatums. Like, I think the fact of the matter is, through the chapters we read, even though Shibusu and Hats and the rest of that team take the stance that they do initially, we do by the end set of those chapters, you know, around 2, 13, 14, see them come around and be like, look, I'm not like what we did was not the best way of going about what we did, but like this is why we did it. Which in my eyes, however small it may be, is recognition, right? It is them taking the appropriate amount of blame for whatever the circumstances are that they're in. We've not seen Endorsi do any of that, and because I don't think that her character is at the level of maturity yet, quite frankly, to where she can take an honest look at herself and be like, well, wait a minute. Am I really to blame in any of this? Like, maybe there is something to be said for like not running guns blazing into every situation. So ultimately, I do think it's time for her to curb it. I do think, unfortunately, it's going to take. I think after this arc, because I think now that Shibusu and Hot and the team collectively have had a moment of self-reflection, they can sort of hopefully pass that on to her and be like, look, Endorsi, like we're going to do this thing. Like we need to talk. We have to be able to communicate in this way with each other, and like we all need to be able to look back and look at ourselves introspectively about what's going on. Because it's, to me, it was very apparent in this conversation here when Bomb says, "Look, we're going after. We need Kaiser's name because Yuri wants it. We need it to get to the floor of death because that's where Rachel's going, and I need to find out more about my past, and I need to find out, you know, there's answers up there as to who I am and what my role is in being here." But instantly taking that and removing everything else but the Rachel part and then turning it on Bam as if he's making this about an ultimatum between her and Rachel is a clear sign of immaturity in my book. It's a clear sign that she's not actually listening to him or actually taking his explanation into account. Because again, it's one thing to be like, well, Endorsi's life is on the line. You should just give her what she wants. But I would reiterate that if everybody is just giving Endorsi what she wants all the time, or she takes it by force, again, how the fuck is that character supposed to grow? How is she supposed to learn anything? Like characters, this is why characters grow. They need L's. They need solid moments where they get fed some humble pie and they have a moment where they lose. They lose something and it's their fault. And they reconcile with that and they learn and understand that it's their fault so that they, in the future, are like, yes, my actions do have consequences and I can't just do whatever I want.
Yeah, it's definitely a harsh one, unfortunately, in this scenario because I agree with you 100%. But yeah, it does definitely suck in the sense that this L is your dead. So like that's a pretty big L because you can't recover or grow from that because you're dead. So now, you know what I mean? So it's kind of tough.
What I would take away from this is that it's like Endorsi's goal here was to come and get Kaiser's name so that she could get the Lopaba family off of Anak's back. Now, this comes from the word of the Lopaba family, so I'm sort of in this camp initially of like, well, why are we so trusting with their word? But that aside, there is no, you know, let's say she doesn't die from this altercation, right? But ends up not being able to get Kaiser's name, so now she has to be sort of like forcefully on the run or whatever with the team and with Anak. Like, that is still a loss. They were not able to accomplish their goal. But again, it was partially because of Endorsi's recklessness and need to just jump in and punch this problem before talking about it or looking it over. And so again, like I think there's lessons that can be taken from this that aren't just like, well, here's your L and it's your death. Like I think she can still take this loss and learn from it without her having to die. But yeah.
So question for you. So I'm 100% sure this is not going to be the route they take, but I just want to throw a hypothetical. Say the story goes in such a way where this all happens and Endorsi dies. Like literally she dies, right? Like that's the thing.
This thing?
Yeah, from this encounter, they hunt her down, they kill her, right? Because of this. Do you think that death or that punishment is justified? Do you think it's like, well, you had it coming, you know what I mean, for like the things you did? Or do you think there's a little more sympathy involved? Do you think there could have been, play on maybe the opposite side, maybe on Bomb's side to be like, maybe we could hash it out like this, where we do something like that, etc. Does like your mindset change at all, or do you think it stays relatively the same?
I mean, like I get like a little bit of like, of course, like I get there's more sympathy. She died. She's dead now. So it's like, that sucks. If any of these characters died, that would suck. But like, I don't think then it's like, it would make everything I just said irrelevant. I don't think it changes my mindset in the sense that like, no, she's done absolutely nothing up to this point of any sort of introspection, of any sort of like falter or thought on her character. There is literally no point where she blames anybody else for these circumstances, or where she blames everybody else but her for these circumstances. Why isn't Bomb just listening to me? Why aren't these guys just doing what I'm telling them to do? Why don't we just go in there and like, beat up or fight X or Y person? And it's like, well, that's not the point here, right? If everybody again is just giving her what she wants, and we could then argue though that the trade-off for saving Endorsi is killing Bomb. We don't know what's going to happen if Bomb if Bomb either A ends up having to stay here as a servant, or B, and not being the one that gets Kaiser's name. So like, is it fair to say that Endorsi should live because she's Endorsi? Because she's a princess of Jihad?
Yeah, well, I think that one's a little shaky because Bomb does have his name. He doesn't have it taken, nor does he so he's not endangered of having to be subjugated there. It's a matter of him taking Kaiser. I don't know why Kaiser keeps on evading me. Kaiser Sose. Him taking Kaiser's name as a to fulfill his thing to get to Rachel and find more about himself. So I don't think it's like either Endorsi or Bam dies. But
I guess I'm saying I don't think Endorsi's going to die in this.
I'm like 1,000% sure she's not. But I'm
this
just
scaffold either. But I guess that's my point. Is
I like the moral questions.
Is it's like, well, what if Endorsi dies? And it's like, well, what if Bam dies? Again, leaning in the moral questions.
Well,
it's
I guess my point in that is that it is in this current scenario, even though again, she's not going to die, but like in this current scenario, taking the hypothetical, the prospect of death for Endorsi is a million times higher, right? Because it's blatantly said, if you do not do this, we will hunt you down and kill you. Whereas in Bomb scenario, it's not so blatantly clear. There would have to be a bunch of different routes and things that circumvent and intersect for it to be like, okay, it resulted in your death. So I think you could break down those things all day, right? You could come to the end of the day, well, if Bomb doesn't do this, then he doesn't get there, and then he dies. But like in the moment, this is what we have to work off of. If you don't accomplish this goal, we kill you. If you don't accomplish this goal, you don't get X information, which could result to shit later on. But you know what I mean? Like, we don't know. So I guess it's like, how much info how do I word this? Like, how much info do you need from like either side, or like how much do you need to be able to like slightly peer into the future, if possible, before you either do like have maybe more sympathy or understanding, or maybe be like, okay, we need to have a change of plan, or you don't? Like, is there anything, you know what I mean? Like,
I guess it's if like, let's say Yuri was the one who came to Endorsi.
Yeah.
And she was like, yo, I can make sure that either the Lopo family, or maybe even just these two twins or whoever, stays off you and Enoch's cases. I am going to need Kaiser's name though, like to do some shit, right?
Yeah,
she works it or whatever. Then innately there's more sympathy in there for me, because Yuri is, in my mind, a trusted source. The twin sisters of the Lopa Ren family, who are actively trying to get rid of not only Endorsi and Enoch, but Kaiser, are not a trusted source, right? These people coming to Endorsi and being like, hey, all right, tell you what, like, we'll get off your guys' back. You just got to get rid of Kaiser for us. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, and granted, the backstory, Endorsi doesn't have the backstory that we have, but it's like, if we know they don't value Kaiser as a member of their family, they don't value Endorsi, they don't value Enoch, it's like, you're going this hard and fighting to get this name for people who we could argue are just going to kill you after you do it. You know what I mean? You don't have that safety and security you're saying of like, oh, I just got to get the name and then we'll be fine. It's falsified in my mind. So it feels weird to like bank everything on that when it's like, like for me obviously it's, like I said, it's different for the characters. They don't have perspective, but like for me, it's different to be like, well, if we just give her the name, she'll be fine. Because again, like the Bomb thing, like we don't know if she'll be fine. These sisters could literally turn around and just clock clock these two, or it's to be like, all right, thanks for killing Kaiser, but like the hunt's still on.
Sure.
And then they're fucked.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of your points, I will say. So, I do think that the potential punishment for this that I guess, Bomb Kun are kind of administering, whether intentional or, not, it just comes with the territory. Is definitely a little harsh. I think it's a little overkill, no pun intended. I do think Endorsi needs to grow a lot as a character. That's actually one of my reasons that, funnily enough, like when people are like, oh, she's totally like the waifu material of the story, that like I just haven't been able to put her in that box personally, because I think she's very, at least it's still at this point in the story, very immature, and just like a young teenage girl. You know what I mean? It's like, I want what I want and I'm gonna get it, and if I don't get it, like I'm gonna throw a fit and whatever, which I don't really jive with, and hopefully we get past that at some point. But I do think it's a pretty harsh punishment for be like, okay, you jacked up, like your alternative is death, and like it's one thing to be like, well, you technically don't know, because like down the like could betray you, they could do this, like, Bomb not doing it could do this, blah, blah, blah. But like, I do feel at the end of the day, it's like, okay, these are the facts that we have to work with. If we don't accomplish X mission, we know 100% that X person is going to die. If we complete this, we're still probably 50-50. But I guess it's just ever tilting the scale potentially in that favor, is, noteworthy, I think, as compared to X other thing. I think Endorsi definitely makes mistakes. I think she definitely hopped in, but we even had SIU in the blog post saying something along those lines, where he seemed to have shown a slight amount of sympathy towards it, being that, she was coming here to help X person, and although she definitely has rushed in and like made mistakes, I think the potential of death is it's like kind of an overkill lesson. That's my opinion. I think I give maybe Endorsi, and not because she's Endorsi, because again, I don't really care, but I think I give her a little more sympathy in this scenario, and I do think that it's not all like, oh, this is one person's fault as compared to the other. Not that you said that, but I'm just saying in general. And I think, at the end of the day, Kun and Bomb have their own reasons. You could call them selfish or not, to do what it is that they do. And Endorsi right now is essentially, is treated as a rival, as an enemy. And, they even make their decision with the potential that she dies. So I think that's it's a pretty big one.
I definitely agree that it is a big trade-off, or a big L to swallow. But I would argue that, like, with a character like Endorsi, where she's not just prideful, she's not just stubborn, like she's disgustingly stubborn and she's incredibly prideful. I mean, this is a woman who will do wrong and then spit in your face and be like, why did you do that? I would argue that, especially in a story like this, what greater motivation is there to end up learning from and having an introspection than like, wow, I could have died from that shit. Like, I really need to, like, I think it's time to take a step back and really look at myself in the mirror and be like, am I the one causing some of these problems?
Yeah.
And not to say that like this scenario then turns her into the perfect person, but it's just, I don't know. I think it's a hard L to take, but it's a hard, like that's what we need.
Yeah, I think though the only thing my issue with this is that I feel like that argument is being purveyed from someone who knows she's not going to die, and I would agree with you there, but I think it's a different story when you genuinely have no clue, like you could literally die, because like a lot of it is purveyed as, oh, when this is over, and when she gets out of this and realize I could have died. You know what I mean? But like there is, for equating this to the moral dilemma of the real life situation and not knowing that this is, just a story, we might not even get that scenario. So I think it's a pretty harsh, I think she definitely needs to learn her lessons, but I think there's like this middle ground between, exerting yourself and not, that like, I think, the fact that we don't know if she could die, like, I don't think it's fair to say that it's like when she gets out of the scenario,
Well,
like she's
okay,
not getting
fair
the
enough.
ability,
But I guess what I meant is that like, Endorsi's not the only character that's been punished with the possibility of death because of their actions. So it feels weird to excuse her from that circumstance, especially because she is responsible for putting herself in it just because, like,
well, I guess
because
she's their friend, you know what I mean? And I think that's where the biggest thing is implied here, where it's like, if we took some Joe Schmo from like side character fodder or whoever the hell, we probably A, wouldn't be going this hard into this conversation in general, but B, I think that's where the biggest line is, and that's where potentially someone could land on, you know, Endorsi's side or the other side, is that in the end of the day, we do know Endorsi. Bomb knows Endorsi. There's even potential, you know, there's something like a spark there. Kun, although he has his problems with her, knows Endorsi, and like they kind of refer to her as like, these aren't our friends. Even Shibasu says it's like, we're not friends to them. You know, like this is what it is, or at least she was in that scenario. So I think that's what makes it hit a little closer to home, is the sense that it's like, I don't think it's necessarily, you know, like, I'm not doing this. It's not me defending Endorsi because it's Endorsi individually. I think it's me being like, it's a pretty hard punishment to potentially administer, being that this isn't some rando that you find off the side of the street. Like, this is someone that has been with you, you know what I mean? Like, kind of like for a lot of what's been going on. And like, it's very personable, you know, which makes it a little harder for me. But anyway, I'm sorry. I just kind of, Gavin, you could have thoughts, by the way, if you want to go off. I apologize. We kind of went back and forth there, but I am curious to know whether Gavin wants to say so or not, what the audience thinks. I know there was definitely some argumentation within the chat during the live stream for a long while, and the Discord. This seems to be the biggest topic of discussion here. So in a civil way, if you guys have any sort of thoughts on this overall thing here, what are they? We'd love to know them in the comments down below. But Gavin, I apologize for taking up so much time there. Do you have anything to say?
Honestly, well, I couldn't even begin to just backtrack on all that. So pretty much Spark Note, I follow most of what Isaiah's thoughts on it. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like, look, if push comes to shove, you have a target on your back, you're going to through this whole process. Like, you're literally teammates with a knock. Like, if it's not now, it's going to be later. You're going to have the 10 great families after you. Like, you already like bam. So there's just, for me, this is just inevitable, whether in the future or now. So you all are with each other. Literally, if the sisters are going to come at you and kill them, at least have Bam and Kun there, and everybody just ice them at the same time. And then you really just piss off the 10 great families. You're going to do it eventually. I don't care. That's the case story. But I'm going to go more surface level on the question at hand, because I actually differ from you guys a little bit, both of you, on that, in terms of her reckless nature. Is it time to curb it, or is it something that sets her apart from others? So although this is an oxymoron, I am a big fan of her if it was facilitated recklessness. And not that this correlates to Rack in any way, but I can't help but think back to the door test where Kun couldn't make that decision. Rack just busted the door open, and pretty much Hong Sung Yu. Wow, I totally forgot that name. And he was like, yeah, you need these different mindsets and companions that balance each other out. And I feel like she is almost a good female version of Rack, where she doesn't care, she's balls to the walls, and is reckless. So if she's able to facilitate that more and actually like follow what Shibusu says and like relies on her other teammates and isn't just so selfish, whatever she feels like she needs to do at that moment, it could actually be a benefit and a good thing. So I don't think that she necessarily needs to curb it in a sense, but tone it down. Yes, like dial that bitch back like down to 1 or 2. But like I still think her reckless nature is important. It diversifies the team, and it is a personality trait that is beneficial. However, to the extent that it's been amplified and that she's been using it as, it is a detriment and it needs to be solved, although I don't think it should be completely erased, because it does make her an individual. It's important to her character, and I think it is important to the team. However, it does bring up problems when you just go balls to the wall, which she is known to do. So if she just dials it back, is able to control it more and facilitate it, I feel like it's just a win-win. So that is my 2 cents on it.
Okay. All right, moving on. I think I got the next question here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that discussion.
Oh, by the way, that question was by Dark North Emperor. I didn't put the name in the question.
Thank you, Dark North, for making us waste our time. No, just kidding. No, seriously, good question. So anyway, number 5 question comes from Riru. RIRU. So thank you for the question. It says, I think this arc is doing a great job of showing the differences between Kun and Shibusu as both the leaders and the strategies of their teams. What do you think about their dynamic? What are each of their strengths and weaknesses? So again, this kind of gets enveloped sometimes within the overall arching, thing that we were talking about. So I don't want to go too hard into that. So I will keep it a little more, face value here. I think Shibusu I can't help but think. I actually have no evidence to back this up, but so fair enough. You can correct me if you don't think this is the case. But I do feel as if Shibisu, especially when we're comparing him to Kun, definitely in most people's minds takes a really big backseat in terms of intellect, ability, everything that it is that they can do and what they're capable of. And I feel like some people sleep on Shibisu in terms of how relevant of a character he is and how intelligent he is and all of those things, right? Combined, I could go on. Because Kun is just such a likable character by so much of the audience that he kind of overshadows Shibisu. But I think sometimes I need to, because I'm guilty of this sometimes too, of like forgetting about it and then realizing, right? I feel like I have to come back once in a while to being like, no, Shibisu is like actually incredibly intelligent, like incredibly resourceful. And I would say, although he has his mistakes, a pretty damn good leader, all things considered. I think Shibisu has a pretty difficult task laid ahead of him in the sense that he is not endowed with any sort of latent ability from the 10 great families. He is not a princess. He is not powerful in the physical sense by any stretch of the term. He has virtually no sway in terms of things of the tower. As a whole, he is a normal person. He is like a Hots, I guess, in his own way. But through this, I wouldn't say cunning, because I think Kun fits more into the cunning bag here, but just through his academic, as SIU puts it in his blog post, intelligence has been able to propel himself very far, and all the while keeping morals, generally speaking, relatively intact, right? Like we see a lot of times, SIU references this in his blog. He says that it's interesting that in this arc, Shibisu takes more of a Kun approach to the whole thing, right? With kind of the underhandedness, using Viol and the Fug name to kind of, achieve his ends rather than going in with a much more academic and logistical approach to it, right? So I think it's interesting when you compare these two characters in general in their leadership style. I also feel that Shibisu has a very difficult task ahead of him in the sense that he has to wrangle in Endorsi, who we just had a 30-minute conversation about, and a Nock, who have their ridiculous problems of their own. They're both incredibly strong, headstrong too, and stubborn. And honestly, don't treat him. It's hard to garner that respect from those two people. Where someone like Kun in his scenario, for the most part, kind of has everyone on board with what it is that he's doing. They understand he's from the 10 great families. He is a Kun. They understand his latent ability, and there's really no questions asked. He doesn't have to basically wrangle in a princess the entire time or do something or two of them, if you want to count a Nock, at all times of the given day. So I think Shibisu deserves a lot of credit, and I think as a leader, he's fantastic as a leader just in general. The fact that he's able to keep all these people together in a cohesive unit is something to me that speaks volumes. I think he's human, so he has room to grow, but I think that his strategies, have worked so far, and especially with the amount of things that he has to overcome, we don't get to see it quite as much in action as we would with someone like Kun because we have so much panel time with him. But I think it's something admirable, and I think that's a strength of his to be able to keep his keep his morals grounded and wrangle in all of these external factors and try and go about this in the best way for his team and Kun's team, at the same time. But I want to, whatever your guys' thoughts are, and especially, if you have any strengths or weaknesses on the side of Kun, because I know you guys are definitely bigger Kun stans than I am, so maybe you could speak to it a little better than I could.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer the question in its entirety, I do definitely think that there's obvious dynamics, let's say, in both their leadership. One being that Kun is a little bit more sly, cunning, and a little bit more, I guess like naturally gifted in the sense of like his awareness of like his surroundings and like people and how to use all these chess pieces, so to speak, because he just seems to have such a better understanding of like how people work, how like what X does to Y and all that kind of stuff. Where Shibisu, and not to fault Shibisu, but again, I just think the dynamics are different. I think while Kun can rest on those laurels much easier, Shibisu has to sort of like work more to be, this good leader. He has to like actually like do a lot of like scouting and planning and like sort of do, I guess, what you would consider like the traditional groundwork of somebody who was leading this crew. I do think he also does have a tougher team to lead because he's got, I mean, I would say definitely at least two people on his team being Endorsi and Anak, but I would even argue like just all of it, like most of his team, except for I think Hots, like actively probably don't always do what he says. You know what I mean? I mean, you have Endorsi, like I said, obviously, and Anak. But I would argue Laurel. I mean, that nigga's just always sleeping. Always sleeping. Never once do I think he attends a meeting. Never once do I think he pitches in any of these plans. That man literally has people strap him to their backs on fucking clockwork 24/7. That doesn't feel like a team player to me. So it's like
Unreal.
He definitely has a wilder basket, I guess, to to maintain but like one, I would argue, if like you flip them as leaders, and this is where I'll get into their weaknesses and strengths, because I think Kun, again, with having just such an innate better understanding of people and like the tower and like the places that they're in and circumstances, might be able to wrangle in Shibasu's team quicker and might have an easier time personally doing it because of the places Kun is willing to go. I think part of Shibasu's struggle in being able to wrangle his team together isn't just the fact that like he's not a Kun, right? Like he's not as cunning and whatever, but is that he like often will take the more high ground. And he's like, all right, how can I make these people see what I'm trying to do, but like the right way? How like, you know what I mean? And that sounds like it's going to be a much slower process because Endorsi and Anak don't seem like people that you can like sit down with a cup of tea and like talk, like let's have a team meeting about our, all that stuff. And so, but in that way, it's like it's hard to. I think the main difference in their dynamics, quite frankly, is just that Kun is a little bit more, or a little bit less in his head emotionally, unless we're talking about something that involves bomb. When it comes to making plans and when it comes to predicting strategies and that stuff, and is willing to utilize any tool at his disposal, to get an outcome. Where Shibasu, more times than not, will take the high ground. And I think a lot of what we saw in this part of the arc and in these latest chapters is really just desperation on Shibasu's part. It was really just, again, because of this situation that Endorsi got them in, is Shibasu being the leader, having to cover everybody's tracks and having to be like, fuck, all right, Endorsi screwed up. Like, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? Like, you know what I mean? And again, not having the tools or at his disposal, so to speak, to be able to just go out and fix it, started to lean into this corner of desperation of like, okay, well, what's the one thing that would really fuck everybody up here? Oh, Viol. We could, like, you know what I mean? And then, like, we even see it when Kun initially is like, no, we're not helping you. We see Shibasu panic because he's like, oh, fuck, this isn't good. I was, like, really banking on this, like, him saying yes and him helping us, and now that he's not, I think that is his only weakness, I will say, is that, like, maybe because he doesn't have the sort of, awareness and talents that Kun does, is he's a little bit more prone to like self-doubt and like panic than say a leader like Kun is. But I think that's more personality, to be honest, than like their talents, because even without Kun's gifts, we know Kun as a person, his personality is he's very much like, no, I am a ruler. Like, I'm a person who gives orders, and like his mindset is just different than Shibasu. I think Shibasu is a little more like, I'm the leader and like we're all part of this team. This, like, so I feel like at the end of the day, like, I pretty much ironed it all out, but I think that that's their sort of big weaknesses and strengths.
Yeah. Gavin, what are your thoughts? And what do you think a weakness of Kun's would be as a leader?
Okay, so that's actually, I only had a little tidbit to add on to this, and I feel like as a whole, I feel like a strength for Shibasu, and that it's a weakness for Kun, is that I really feel like Shibasu is able to accept when he has made a mistake in his rulings, is willing to change the plan and bend to other people's plans or whim in terms of a better solution. Whereas Kun, when things do not follow to his plan, or if people don't follow his plan the way he wants it to, he almost gets very dark and almost self-destructive, where he gets very angry and like bitter, and he's like, "You like I'm right." Like, it's almost like he closes himself off, and he's unwilling to accept other opinions that might actually be better, because he's stuck in his own mind and that he's right at this time, and he's always right because I'm Kun and I'm a genius. Where Shibasu, I really felt that growth from this chapter, where yes, he messed up and he panicked, but ultimately he was able to reflect, step back, and then helped Kun and Bam with his plans, because he realized they might actually have a better route. He didn't get all like deceitful or upset or angry and just thought a way to like finagle his plan through it. Like, he was able to step back and facilitate and like just rethink and remap and really bend to other people's thoughts and, you know, wishes. Where I feel like Kun struggles with that, especially when it comes to other missing variables that don't come into play, where he's able to adapt, but there are times where we've really seen him just go into a scary place where we're like, yo, dude, you need to like calm down. Like this is getting kind of bad. And he just gets in this like in his head crazy nature. So that's a flaw that I have seen from Kun and that we're probably going to see when more really big decisions come up in the future and really get to see his dark side. So I still love the man. He is my number one, but it's just something that you know is there and we've seen before.
Sure. And
something that, you know, Shibasu is less susceptible to.
Sure.
Whether that comes with his ignorance or not, I don't know, but it's just his personality. So, you know, it's definitely nice to see.
Yeah, very good points. Isaiah, I think next question is for you.
All right, next question comes from On 2005. She says, as Endorsi said, countless Jihad princesses from the normal family die unnoticed, hence princesses from the 10 great families have a greater advantage over them. So they try to get rid of such princesses from a normal family. Endorsi, not being from one of the 10 great families, has a greater threat on top of climbing the tower with a knock, as well as being affiliated with Bam. But not once has she had death knocking at her door until now. Using that to her advantage, the Lopo Ba twins are trying to sabotage and kill Endorsi. Your thoughts on the reaction of Endorsi after hearing Bam say he can't help her after all of this? So does a little bit lean into one of the earlier questions that we had on here, which was the reaction to Endorsi's reaction to Bam after they talk, and it's. Again, I guess you could just refer to that question if I'm being honest. So really, the only thing I have to say on it is that what are my thoughts on her reaction? Again, I think it's a little immature of her to, sort of assume that Bam is saying he doesn't want to help her just because he ultimately doesn't like her or likes Rachel more, or because her, again, immediately going to twist it into this ultimatum route of like, oh, I get it. So you're picking Rachel over me is not A, what Bam said, and B, the point he was trying to make. And so I just think it echoes that her character isn't grown enough. There's still room for her to improve and really like actually reflect. I think that's the big thing here. We've been talking about like Shibasu, and like Shibasu has taken the actual time when shit goes wrong on his end to be like, all right, fuck, maybe I fucked up here or whatever. I don't think Endorsi hasn't. You know what I mean? I never once in the chapters we read was there a moment where I was like, okay, where she was like, maybe I did fuck this up. And I think that her reaction proves it, because when things go wrong, she's very quick to jump on somebody else's back or blame somebody else for the problems. So that's really it.
Yeah. I would say, a lot of my thoughts from before are echoed. We definitely had plenty of words on that. So I refer to question 4 for all my thoughts on that. I definitely think her feelings are justified, but I guess justified and right are two different things, or maybe I got that wrong. I feel like I understand where her emotions are coming from and her feelings, and I do feel sympathy for them. In terms of what you think is right and is wrong, maybe is a different story and a matter of perspective, depending on where your allegiances lie and who you think needs what. But I do think that Endorsi does need to grow. I mean, they all need to grow. Everyone needs to grow. They never stop growing as a character, but Endorsi, it becomes painfully obvious, in some of the chapters that we have here and just in general. And thank you for the question, Anne. But Gavin, do you have anything else?
No, kind of same thing. It's echoed, with this question. I mean, if anything, it like kind of solidifies my thought where it's like the threat's always there. Like they always are going to have targets on their back. Just bite the bullet and get it over sooner than later. So that's
just die already.
No. I'm like, you have Bam, you have Kun. Like, you're never going to have a better team if you're going to take on these twins. So like, I would rather not take their words and just ice them. And
I don't think it's only the twins. That's one thing that, and I know you're not saying that in particular, but I want to get that across as, someone who's, maybe is thinking that or is a first time read through. Like, they're talking about the Lopo Bia Ren, right? That's it.
Well, it's actually Lopo Bia. Lopo Bia. Ren is the specific name of the guy.
Yeah. Lopo Bia family as a whole. So like they're I guess representatives of the family right now, but it's not only them.
I agree, but like
just want to get that across.
Yeah, but again, like when they climb up, eventually they're gonna have Jihad after them, because again, with the situation they're in, like granted that's in the future, but inevitably it's gonna lead to the same thing. So it's like you're gonna have all the families against you at one point, or at least you might have sects that aren't. But my whole thing is you're always gonna have targets on your back from 10 families, and this is gonna be no difference or exception. So why risk everything else and still it's on the reliance of that family holding their word. If you deliver said name, like, I'm sorry, but you've already tried to get rid of her before with Rice Ball. Like, I'm not going to give you something and then expect for you to turn the blind eye when eventually down the line, Jihad's going to be like, hey, you might need to take care of this. And then it's just going to lead to them being sent out for me, it's just a cycle that with this solution that she was given, it's not going to solve anything. Like, it's literally just going to lead into another cycle. So just bite the bullet, kill the twins, and then just deal with it later, and you'll be with Bam and Coon. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Moral of the story: somebody else will clean it up.
quite literally.
Oh my
All right,
gosh!
so that's what you're saying. I'm reading the next question, correct?
You're reading the last question.
The
my friend.
last question is from the 29th taco. Wait, the 29th?
Yeah, 29th taco.
Okay. Oh, that kind of threw me off. So far, we've seen backstories for Ran, Kaiser, White, and Yiwa. Any thoughts on the similarities and differences between the worldviews of the different families?
Well, I'll go into it real fast, and I don't know. So I'll do the similarities. They're all assholes and complete utter pieces of trash. Like, if anything, I don't think they're much different where any of them is a nice family. Like, they're all trash. They all are pretty, like, emotionally and physically abusive to said children and quite literally don't care about them unless it benefits them in some long haul route. So it's like, yeah, let's just get rid of all of them. Destruction of the 10 great families. But, yeah, I mean, worldviews, I guess you can say, I wouldn't even say Ran had it better in a sense. I guess his mom was more... because we've seen flashbacks of his mom giving Ran advice, and especially with fighting the Ari. Was that it?
Was that his sister?
Pretty sure it was
his
the mom.
I think it was his mom.
Okay, it looked
mentioned.
really similar to the one princess. Is the only reason I
I'm-
say that, and he's from the Muscheni, and so she's.
I'm gonna go
Muscheni.
on. It's his mom. It might not be.
If anyone has clarification on that, I'm curious. But anyway,
Yeah, that
go
would
on.
be
I'm
nice.
sorry.
But if that was his mother, I guess there was at least some sort of person he could talk to within his certain situation that might be different from other families where, you see White, who literally they didn't even have a father. You try to say something, and he's like, yeah, no, if you're not strong, go eat crap. They didn't have that advice, I guess, that maybe Rand did in talking to his mom. And even if it was some bittersweet stuff, at least she gave him something that he applied to his life and fight that actually helped him out in some sort of way. Kaiser, and I mean I don't even have to explain it. We already went over that. Refer to last question, but I mean, one of the worst occurrences that could happen in that family. What?
It wasn't the last question.
No, one of the last questions.
Yeah,
one of the last questions. We already went in on it, but horrible family and things that happen. Although I would say prior she might not have had it all bad until the whole Princess of Jihad thing came up, because it seems like prior to her being that prospect, she lived in some sort of, luxury, obviously, and had some good relations with her family until she brought shame onto them and went through this whole rigmarole. So maybe at an earlier life she had, a better upbringing with maybe some more positivity until this happened, and her family pretty much shunned her and went through all these things. But pretty much, I would say they're all pieces of crap, and they should be demonetized.
Demonetized. No YouTube funds.
That feels weirdly merciful. You guys can live. You're just making no money from YouTube. Nope, not happening. Over my dead body.
I wanted to apply it to our circumstances.
There you go. We've seen similarities and differences between these families and their worldviews. Similarities is really nothing new to add. They're all actual pieces of trash. The differences, though, which I do think are interesting, I don't think are huge, but I do think it's interesting that they're there, right? So we do have families like the White family, which are I think is about extremist as it gets when it comes to the competitive aspect of being in the 10 great families and what that means and the reputation, where it's no, if you're not strong enough to fight and beat me, I literally don't see you as a valuable use of oxygen. Go get strong or go die. That's it. And so it's not a lot of love and support there. Where it's again, you were bringing up, Gavin, where it's the Coon family, at least if we're talking about the Muscheni branch, referring to the flashback that Ran had, it's there's some, I don't know if you want to twist how to twist this support in the sense that that family is yes, we, the Coons, are the best family ever. And if you see somebody from any of the other families, remind them that the Coons are the best. Yeah. That is the definition of elitist and wrong. But there's, I guess, support in the sense that that mom is not actively spitting in Rand's face and calling him trash. So it's at least he has, I guess,
delusional support.
Yeah, he has like the facade of being able to turn to his family for support. Whereas again, I bring up somebody like the whites, where it's like you're not getting anything from anybody. You know, if you're not strong enough to kill your parents, you mean nothing to nobody and go die. And then we have families again, like the Kaisers, where it's like you were saying, it's like, oh, okay, well, their relationships are nice and everybody's kind of doing whatever until this moment comes up. And then I would argue you really get to see how the families are, because I think any family could sort of charade and pretend to be all nice and happy-go-lucky. But like if her just simply choosing to love, like put them in this much of a spiral, it's like, they probably weren't that great from the jump. But like, so I guess again, like while they're all similar in just how trash they are, it's interesting to see that like some of them still have this weird sense of like family, like camaraderie, where others, like the literal family, are their biggest competitors. Like there is no greater threat to the parents of a family or the head of a family than the people in their family, because they're the only ones that could potentially have the power to overthrow them and then take said power. Whereas like, I think, you know, again, and I don't even know how true this is, but like, let's just say families like the Coons, or at least specifically the Macheni branch, are very much like, no, we the Coons collectively are better than everybody. Like if you're a Coon, you're better than everybody else. And like, that's, you know, it's not about like the greatest Coon, or, you know what I mean? At least that's what I've picked up so far. Yeah. I think it's interesting though that all those families grew up in this world of the tower with those ideas, again, however different they may be, because I guess at the very least it says that they're not all 100% interested in just like, or I guess like the image and idea of the great family doesn't ring 100% the same to all the 10 families, right? There is some, again, however slight, variation to like what they all deem as like priority number one.
Yeah, they're all pretty crappy.
Yeah,
just in general, I get these guys really just hit it on the head. It's just different methodology in which they do it, or they hide it, right? They all revere strength, but not strength through suppression, which is the wrong kind of strength to, you know, uplift and cultivate within your family and your children. So there's definitely that. We see it with the Yeon family when Iwa just burns that dude to a crisp, and they're like, "That's great, honey," you know, and they pat her on the head. And it's like, no, that's not great, you know. But they're like, you know, that's fantastic, that's fine. And then, like Isaiah said, you get the Ari family, which is definitely more extreme, where it's like not even that, like cultivating that. It's like, you know, you're garbage.
Like, you're garbage until the people who called you garbage are dead.
That's it. And me. You know what I mean? Which you're never going to do, so you're garbage. You know, like that's how
I do find it interesting, though, that like, and this is just a more, you know, hat tip to SIU. I love the idea that these are the 10 great families, right? Because the word family, when most people hear it, rings with just this overwhelming sense of like unity and compassion. And it's like all these families are anything but that. So it's just so great. Like when the story refers to them, it's like, oh, these great families, like that's their name, right? The 10 great families. So it's like anytime you hear the 10 great families, these are the people you think about. The worst people in existence, probably next to Jihad. It's such a great like dichotomy or duality between like what the word actually means and like what I love it.
No, you're right. Anyway, but like I said, I think these guys hit the nail on the head with that one. So anyway, folks, those are all of our questions that we have for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion. Definitely a longer one, but there were some pretty big questions here and a lot of moral things going on, which, as you know, I love personally discussing those kind of things, trying to relate it to real life scenarios and such. So if you guys have any thoughts, like I said before, so long as you're civil, voice them in the comments down below. Let us know what you think about any of the topics that we went over or anything else that you found interesting within the chapters that we read in our live stream. Again, if you haven't seen those already, definitely check out our live stream of these chapters and definitely check out our blog post read through as well, which are both posted on our YouTube channel already. Make sure you guys are subscribe, all that jazz. You know the deal. See, I can't even talk now because I'm doing it like we've been at this for a while. Bottom line, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to everyone who asked the questions. In general, seriously, you guys are the best. And join our Discord if you want to be the next person potentially on this list, and have your opinions and your voice heard by us. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip. Peace.
Peace.
Hey, you know what it is, dog. memorize. Blaze of the kunais. Find me in the leaf of the cloud. Screaming out Bankai. We just some ghouls though, who like seeing parts fly.